The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of 4 webinars designed to provide you with knowledge and skills to grow and sustain excellent outcomes in your community coalitions. I am Marcia Manter, on staff. Next slide. I'm Marcia Manter, on staff with Oral Health Kansas. The goal of our tri-state collaboration is to develop community oral health coalitions to improve the oral health of all through innovation, leadership, and advocacy. The webinar series is sponsored by the Midwest Collaborative Initiative, a partnership with Michigan, Wisconsin, and Kansas Oral Health Coalitions. Our work is being funded by DentaQuest Foundation. The foundation launched a bold initiative, Oral Health 2020. It is a multi-year effort to strengthen and unify the network, build on current initiative strategies, and expand impact. So we welcome that you are here. We want you to note, please, the panel on the right side of your screen. You may ask questions, type messages. You can ask questions of us. Our speaker said that she'd like to go through on a number of slides before taking questions, and if we get questions on certain topics, we'll stop and talk about those questions. Otherwise, we're going to leave answering questions till the end. So thank you for being here. Our presenter is Gloria Medina. She is the training director. Are you on Gloria's slide? She is the training director at Scope LA. It is building strong coalitions based on health equity analysis, key to creating long-term systemic change. Gloria, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and good morning from the West Coast to all of you. It's really an honor to have been invited and to share Scope's organizing model, and I really hope that what we have to share with you, which has been successful for us doing community.
Gloria, we lost you.
Community engagement. Why don't we go on to the next slide, please? So I want to talk a little bit of Scope before we get into the bulk of the training. I just want to put some context in terms of our models and the work that we're doing and the support that we have been able to build in South Los Angeles around the work that we're doing. So Scope has been organizing African American and Latino communities in South Los Angeles for almost 24 years. We have been waging campaigns that are really led by our community members, and we use these campaigns as vehicles to build grassroots power and to create systemic change. And so you'll be hearing me mention grassroots power and systemic change throughout the presentation, because that is really the foundation of what we're seeking to create here. We here at Scope primarily focus on issues around economic justice, really thinking about job opportunities and pathways out of poverty for our community members. We also focus on health disparities and the criminalization of our community members. So our work in general includes, and I should say not only includes, but at the hub of our work is the community engagement, what we call community organizing. And that is also attached to leadership development. Leadership development not only of our staff and our allies, but primarily of our community members. We also engage in research to help inform our campaigns. We do alliance building to help strengthen the power in South LA. We do the trainings where we go around the country sharing some of our models and our best practices and our tools as we're doing. And we also do political education, again, with our community members and our allies. And over the years, we have developed a number of tools. We have developed a number of models and frameworks that are based on our theory of social change. So as an organization, we have developed a theory of how we understand that change can come about in our community. And so we're sharing some of these tools today, and we hope to continue sharing another tool which I'll talk about later at a later time. Probably, I think it's in August that we'll be sharing another tool. And so about a year and a half ago, we were approached by DentaQuest to start engaging our community members in a more focused conversation about oral health. So as I mentioned, we have been doing work around health disparities in general, but not really focusing in the issues of oral health, although we have had conversations with our members who have been deeply impacted by the lack of oral health care, and obviously has had deep impacts in their overall health in general. So we have definitely stories that come out of our communities in terms of their experience. And so as I mentioned, about a year and a half ago, we started engaging community members in deeper conversations. We have engaged them in a number of listening sessions, smaller sessions where folks can have deeper conversations about their experience in South LA connected to oral health. We have had strategy sessions with our allies and our members, community members, and we have also done surveys, surveying the larger community in South Los Angeles about what are the needs here. So we are also, learning about the oral health sector and really coming up with ideas in partnership with our community about what is it that we want to really see and create here in South Los Angeles when it connects to oral health. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So what we want to do today is we want to just give you an overview, right? We have an hour and a half, and there would be a lot to cover, but we want to give you an overview of our organizing model and what it means for us when we say building strong coalitions, but more importantly, building strong coalitions that are led and supported by community members and community leaders. And for us, that's the cornerstone of ensuring that our work is long-term and that it has a long-term impact. And so in order to produce the systems change that we are seeking, we must engage the folks that are most impacted by this disparities that we are seeking to change, in this case, oral health disparities. And so we will do that today by reviewing what we mean by health equity and a health equity approach to creating systemic change. We will also
Gloria, I think you're cutting out. Are you there?
review the importance and the role of community members. Yes.
There, we can hear you. Cut out for a minute.
Okay. So am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay, so we will review the basic nuts and bolts of organizing models, including the development of effective messages that produce engaged community members, and also how we can build a strong community community coalition of oral health. So let's start kind of at the beginning in terms of what do we mean by social justice. And we talk about social justice as this is the primary work that we do, and so we just want to kind of give you some context. And so our definition, our working definition, is that social justice is a group of organized people working together, working in alliance, in collaboration, and coalition towards an agreed upon political and social ideal. And we strive to achieve permanent system change for equitable distribution of wealth, opportunity, and privileges within our society. So social justice is more than just allocating resources or funding for a specific area, in this case specifically for oral health. It's really about having a racial and economic analysis, which sometimes can be uncomfortable to talk about, but it's really something that we really need to look at. What is the role of racism and discrimination, and what role does it play in actually creating healthy communities. Sometimes that means that we need to take a deep look inward to ensure that our organizations and our agencies are not perpetuating the same historical biases that got us here in the first place, and that we must actually, each of us has to really look inward. And so one of the things that I want to say is that I know that each and every one of us is here, and each and every one of us does this work because we made a conscious decision that we want to create change, right? We want to see all communities have access to oral health. We know the importance of all communities. And we all have good intentions. And so this is why we are engaged in this work. And we want to have long-term impact, specifically in the most disinvested communities. We want to have a positive impact. However, our efforts will not have a long-term impact or a deep impact unless it contributes to a social justice movement. And so something to think about today is really how is our oral health work in our specific states, right? We ask ourselves that question: how does the oral health work that we're doing in California and wherever you're at, how is that work contributing to a social justice movement towards oral health, right? Towards actually bringing equitable distribution long term for oral health. Next. So when we say social justice change, we know that's the work that we want to do. And so for us, the question is, how do we do that? How do we actually create social justice change? So at SCOPE, as I mentioned, we have developed a theory of social change, and we use that theory as a framework to guide our focus, to guide our agenda, to guide our strategies, to really give us a guiding light as to where we're moving forward as an organization. And so briefly, I want to summarize some of our points of our theory of social change and how it relates to oral health. So I will share with you 4 key points. The first one is that we understand that power relationships are not equal right now. And that's something that we need to really, it's one of the cornerstones of our work. And that this inequality in power is the primary reason for the conditions in our community. So by that, what we mean is that those folks, those community members who are most impacted by, let's say, the lack of oral health, those are the folks who actually need to have power and need to have voice to actually impact the problem. So we must really, we're working towards equalizing the power in favor of those most disinvested communities. They need to have a place at the table, and they're not at the table right now when it refers to really creating solutions for the problems that we face. So I would ask you to think about your communities and the areas that you represent, and think about the most impacted folks, the folks who really face disparities in oral health, and what kind of power do they have right now, or lack of power. How can your coalition help increase their voice, right? How can you be a vehicle to help increase their visibility, their power, and their voice in the oral health space? Next is the second point, which for us is that in order to create real systemic long-term change, we must build collective power. So we say always that SCOPE, even though we've been doing this work for over 20 years, that and we have developed relationships with decision makers, we cannot do this work on our own. And so what that means for us is that it is always important to build collaboration, to build coalitions, to build alliances. We need to work in collaborative to work to bring resources and to bring the expertise needed, and it's critical expertise and critical resources that we need in this space to actually create change. And we need to think about who else needs to be part of this effort, right? So it's not just SCOPE, it's really looking at other community clinics and other parent groups and looking at other agencies within South LA to actually help us build a coalition that supports oral health work here. And again, to think about, I would say, think about your own coalition and think about who is not at the table right now. Are there other stakeholders in your community who actually care about the issue, who can actually leverage some sort of resources for the coalition, whether it's funding or relationships with decision makers, or who have knowledge about policies, or folks who actually are already connected with community members in a very deeply engaged way? The third point is that grassroots communities must be at the forefront of this effort. So we need to build a conscious base, and by base we mean a group of community members that identify themselves as part of, for example, SCOPE, or who would identify themselves as part of your coalition and supporting your work. We need to build leadership within that group of folks. They need to be part of the process of identifying what the problem is. They need to be part of the process of drafting the solution to address those problems. And they need to be engaging other community members. So they are your spokespersons. They're the ones who are, what we say, the boots on the ground, talking to other community members and engaging them to be part of your coalition or support your coalition or your work. And also, the grassroots base, they need to be the ones that are actually engaging decision makers, right? So we engage decision makers face to face, but it doesn't have the same impact if it's scoped staff as we're actually bringing folks who are actually living in the current condition in communities. They work, they play, they raise families in these neighborhoods. And so we need to be that vehicle. Our coalitions, our organizations, our alliances need to be that vehicle that lifts the voice of our community. And so to think about, I would also say to you to think about how you are currently engaging community, or if you're not, why you are not engaging community. The other thing is, have community members been part of the process from the very beginning? When you think about your vision and your mission and your goals of the coalition, at what points or how did you engage community members in drafting those? So we need them to be at the table with us, to partner with us, not only just to help support our ideas of what we think are the solutions, but really they need to be part of the process. And the fourth point is that we need a more systematic way of understanding power in order to create change. So this for us means having a good analysis of the political landscape. We need to know what is happening in our communities to develop impact with our outcomes. We need to make sure that what we have set out to do is really what fits within the political landscape of our community. For this, we use a tool that's called Power Analysis. It's the Power Analysis tool that was developed by SCOPE. And this tool is, for us, again, a key point of our work because it's a tool that's very engaging and it helps our community members be part of the conversation. Use it to engage our allies and also our staff, our organizational staff, and really looking at the landscape and figuring out what's viable in terms of what we could win. So I'll talk a little bit about the power analysis towards the end, just to kind of give you an idea of what the next webinar will be about. But again, just to ask you, what do you know about your landscape, your current landscape in the geographical area that you represent? And really, do you have any questions about the viability of really winning your goals? And some of the answers might be in doing a landscape analysis. And really, what do you understand or don't understand about the complex power relationships within your geographical area? Who's making the decisions around oral health? Who is actually influencing those decision makers? Where are those conversations really being had? And are we in those spaces, or are we not? Have we not been invited to be part of those spaces? So these are, again, this is just quickly what our theory of social change is. So the next slide is defining the crisis. So South LA has a story. And we want to tell that story. And I am sure that the story that South LA story is very similar to the story of the communities that you all represent, or the communities that you're all seeking to improve. And so the story in our community is a story of members, community members, actually dealing with a number of issues. And some of those issues are urgent. Some of the issues are pressing. Some of those issues are important, but maybe not urgent to the community member at that specific time. Some of the issues that they face are life and death issues. And so South LA, our community, actually the picture that is told through South LA is that it's an area that has high levels of poverty. It has high levels of unemployment. In all of the city of LA, we are the highest, the area with the highest level of unemployment. We have the lowest levels of quality education. We have very few promising quality job opportunities for young people that are graduating from high school. We have lack of to access nutritious food and also affordable housing. And so this is where our community members are coming from. And so we need to figure out where their need for oral health falls in all of these other issues, right? When they come to us, or when we are confronted with the problem of oral health disparities and trying to find solutions, we need to understand that our community members come to us with all of these other pressing issues. So as we're thinking about, why are community members not keeping their dental appointments? Why it's so hard for them to find resources to actually get from their home to and from a dental appointment. We need to keep in mind that it's a complex issue, and that all of these other things play a part. We need to ask ourselves what is actually impacting the situation. So for example, if there's a lack of healthcare providers or oral health providers in our community, that's just one piece of the problem. We can actually increase that. We can change policy. We can advocate on the behalf of our community and get more dentists back into our community. But we need to understand that that issue is actually exacerbated by the situation that our community members live in. And so we need to figure out, how do we actually address the whole picture. So can you press the next slide? Okay, so right there, all of this conversation that we're having, this is the social determinants of health, right? So we need to think about our communities and how the social determinants of health that they face, how do they have an impact on the access to oral health? Are we including these barriers in our conversations? Are we actually talking about the fact that our community members don't have jobs, the fact that our community members are not eating right, the fact that our community members are maybe facing displacement from their housing? And so how does that actually fit into the strategies of our goals for the year? Next slide, please. So as we're having these conversations, we know that it really leads to systemic change. And so that in order to address the social determinants of health, we must actually produce change within the systems that we are currently working in, the systems that we're currently operating in. So the problems and conditions that we seek to change are actually perpetuated by the system in which we're doing this work. And the current systems have historically failed the most vulnerable communities, right? This is not new. Whether it's oral health, whether it's high blood pressure, whether it's diabetes, whether it's teenage pregnancy, we know that all of the issues that really plague our community have a historical context. And so in order to create change within the system, we must understand the root causes of that system, the root causes of the problem. And so understanding those root causes will help us figure out where the system is broken and how we need to change it. So this means having, again, sometimes those uncomfortable conversations about the role of race and economics and how those two play within our system, right? And when we say systems, we're thinking of our health system, our education system, our employment system. So I would say, we need to think about really how then we build enough power within our community to actually start changing the system in that impact our communities. So can you click the next piece, please? So to think about, I would say, really, does health access for all equal health for all, right? We know that over the years and historically we have invested in different ways towards community health. A perfect example is the Affordable Care Act, right? And so this is, a effort to make sure that there's health access for all. But the question for us is that going to equate to equal health for all? And so for us, that means that, again, the allocation of funds and resources might eliminate some of the problem, or maybe have some impact, but really, is it eradicating preventable disease in low-income communities, right? Like, is it eradicating oral health disease in children or in older adults? We know that it's possible, but again, are we actually creating systems change that would actually have that level of impact? And so we ask ourselves, why not? Why isn't that we're having that kind of impact? And again, is our work, our collaborative work, our coalition work actually contributing towards moving us to actually creating a system that's more equitable, and moving away from a charitable framework, but actually understanding that our community needs more than charity. It actually needs a system that actually would work in their favor. So we can move on to the next slide. So health equity. So when we're talking about health equity, this is much more than equality. It's more than equal distribution of resources, right? We know that some communities need more investment than others. And so we are talking about the distribution of resources, which is led really by an analysis of the social determinants of health. What are the social determinants of health that are having a deep impact in our community? And so how do we then, how does that analysis really help us inform how we then distribute the resources and the programs and the funding that we need to actually have health equity? So the definition that I like, I've taken from Dr. Georgia C. Benjamin, and it's that health equity means social justice. It means social justice in health. So, for example, no one is denied the possibility to be healthy for belonging to a group that has historically been economically or socially disadvantaged. Health disparities are the metrics we use to measure the progress towards achieving health equity. And by that we mean that if we're starting to see an impact on health disparities, that is an indication that we're actually moving in the direction of health equity, and that that this reduction of health disparities is an evidence, right, that our work is actually more systemic, is more long-term, and they're actually creating systems change. So the closer we move to quality oral health across race, across economics, across geographical areas, the more closer we move, just leveling the playing field, the closer we're getting to health equity. So quickly, I'll just give you a brief review of our community organizing model. This is just a snap picture. So when we say community organizing, or some people say community engagement or gaining community support, we think about it in a geographic specific. So we think about really identifying the communities, the neighborhoods, the precincts, or the actual community blocks in which we actually want to start engaging people. We don't have all the resources to say we're going to engage all of South LA or all Los Angeles or even all South LA. So we think about the areas in South LA that are most impacted. Next. Next, we also think of, we identify our primary constituency or our primary groups, the primary set of residents, and even community institutions, other community groups who actually need to be organized. So who are the folks who are most impacted, who have the greatest stake in this issue, in this case oral health in South LA, and identify them as our primary focus or target for community organizing. The next thing is the use of issue campaigns as a vehicle to address the problems and conditions, but more importantly, as a vehicle to engage folks. If we go to our community members with our larger vision and our larger goals, a lot of times they don't feel engaged because they don't see the importance or the urgency of the work that we're doing. But if we select a very specific goal and we develop a campaign around that very specific goal, and we then engage them in this issue campaign, it's something that is more tangible for community members to actually look at and feel like they can be engaged in, because they can actually picture what the end result will look like at the end of the campaign. Number 4 is that we consciously and systematically develop grassroots leaders among the community. So what that means for us is that throughout our whole process, throughout our whole work plan, throughout our campaigns, throughout our organizational or coalition goals and mission and vision, we always make sure that we're inserting in a very conscious way, in a very systematic way, the development of our grassroots. We need to develop leaders out of our membership. And so that's a very conscious, it's not an afterthought, it's a very conscious piece of our work. Next. So number 5 is that we also seek to change the power relationships towards the benefit of our community members. So we talked about this at the very beginning in our theory of social change. We ask ourselves if the goals that we actually have set forward actually produce an opportunity to change power relationships. And that means, are we elevating the voice of our community member? Do they have a space now to actually articulate what they think the solution is, or what the strategy or the tactics to actually achieving those goals could look like? Are they developing the ability to speak on our behalf and to articulate the goals of the coalition? And are they also ready to speak to other community members and to decision makers about the goals again and the vision and the mission of the coalition? And I'm going to say also that, just so that I don't forget, it's also building the understanding of the issue and the sector of our community members, right? So educating them about oral health issues and why we think the solutions that we are actually addressing, why they would be actually the best solution. So having these informed conversations with our community members. And then number 6 is that we seek to build a sustained, ongoing, independent, democratic organization that is accountable to community. And so this is really important. When we start talking about community organizing and community engagement, trust is at the cornerstone, is at the foundation. And so we need to build a coalition or an organization where we're going to bring in community members and engage them, but it's really a democratic, it has a democratic form and structure to it, where we are accountable to community. That's our primary, that's what we primarily accountable to, and that they also have a say and a voice and a place, not only within the system, but also within our organization. So I would just say, you know, before we go on to the next slide, I would just say to look at these community organizing um, um, areas and really think about how your coalition can actually start moving towards really practicing some of these, if you're not practicing some of these areas already in terms of leadership development, really being specific of who you're organizing or who you're engaging, really building issue campaigns that engage community members, and really how does your space, the space that you're engaged in, how is it open or welcoming to community members, or maybe how it's not, and how do you go about changing that? Next. So we have assumptions of the work that we do, right? We have some basic assumptions of what we can actually achieve through community organizing. The first thing is know that it is possible for our community folks, our constituency, to actually take action on their own behalf. You know, sometimes we hear folks are doing work in the community, or who are advocating for community, who, you know, just because change can be slow, and this is hard work, that, you know, sometimes, you know, they feel like community members don't care, or community members are not interested, or community members really don't care about oral health. But as we've talked to community members and surveyed them and listened to them, they understand the importance of oral health. Not only just for the issues of their mouth, but also they understand and they can articulate how it's connected to the rest of their body, because they've had first-hand experiences, negative experience, and they care about the issue. But we know that it's possible for them, if we organize them and we give them the space, that it is possible for them to actually take action on their own behalf. The other thing is that it's also possible to shift power towards the benefit of the people that we're organizing, right? If we have effective organizing strategies. So they can have power, they can have knowledge, they can develop skills, they can develop relationships with the decision makers, so that they actually are shifting power towards on their own behalf also. And that we also understand that at the end of the day, building relationships is key. So it is relationships deliver committed people. Organizing, bringing people to the table can be difficult, again, because of all of the other issues that they're dealing with in their own personal life. But really, if our work that we do is about relationship building and being out there in the community in different spaces, whether it's door to door, through the telephone, through health fairs, through community forums, and building relationships, knowing them by name, understanding what they face as a resident of South LA, and so that we can deliver committed people to be engaged with us long term. Next. So when we say building a movement, building a social justice movement, there is a, you know, again, there is a system, there is a strategy on how to do this, and we do this by again building a collectively agreed upon effort, right? It's not just Scope's perception of what the solution is for South LA, or what any other coalition thinks that the solution is, but really is an organized collective effort. And so we do this by engaging community members in different ways. The first thing is that we outreach, right? And so this is where we make first contact with people in the community. They might not know us, they might not know who Scope is, they might not even be aware of the oral health issue. But this is where we say, like, we're signing them up, right? We outreach to them, we talk to them about being potential new members. And here, just to say that Scope is a member organization. We're a membership-based organization. We have about 700 community people who identify themselves as Scope member and who know our work and have been engaged in our work at different levels. Not everyone's engaged at the same level, but these are folks who want to know about our work, want to keep involved, want to keep updated with the work that we're doing. And some of them are also more deeply involved. So this is the outreach phase, right? This is where we go to health fair. This is where we go to other events that maybe other organizations are having. This is where we actually might go to a laundromat or a market or a PTA meeting, and we start talking to moms and dads and different parents and start outreaching. Next is the recruitment. So we must recruit people in terms of getting them involved, right? So this is where we talk about commitments. We are starting to commit folks. First of all, some folks are committed to identify themselves as a scope member, understand our work, and so they also are committed to come to meetings, educational forums. They start by themselves as a leader, and also might volunteer to be part of one of our committees. This is the base. This is what we call our base. This is the what's at the hub of the work that we do, the folks that we actually recruit to play different roles and to support our work in different ways. The next strategy is the mobilization. And so here is where we get a critical mass of constituents, a critical mass of South LA members to actually commit to participate to an event. It might be a protest, a rally, some sort of activity or accountability session or town hall that actually help us put pressure on decision makers, right? And so when we recruit people, those are folks who are more committed to be more closely to us and closely to our work and guiding our work. The folks that are actually mobilized are a larger group of people, right? Some of them are part of the 700 group of people who are actually identifying themselves as supporters of our oral health work and our economic work and our health work in general. But sometimes we mobilize folks who are just, from the greater South LA area, who might be interested in that one event or that one rally, and so this is where we can mobilize large number of people. Next. So we have to have obviously an organizing plan, right? An engaging plan. How are we going to engage folks? And I've shared with you again just a snap picture of what our organizing model looks like. But having the model, having the strategy is not enough. I think more importantly is having an engaging message. And this is the story. How are you telling the story of the work that you're doing that will really excite community members, right? That will really speak to where they are at and will speak to their needs, right? So we develop our work plans, we develop our goals. So if our goal, one of our goals is integrating oral health screening into 1 to 3 year old development screening, reducing the risk of tooth decay by promoting community water fluoridation, building oral health literacy into elementary and high schools. All key, very important solutions to moving us towards oral health equity. But these might not necessarily be engaging for community members. We need to think about how do we then take these goals, take our efforts, the way that we have articulated them, how do we take them and we actually produce a story, we tell the story so that it's engaging for our community members. So part of that is then we have an actual structure, what we say the anatomy of the story or the anatomy of the message. The first thing that we do is think about the introduction. So we talk about who we are, right? Who are you? So you can take the next. Okay, so who are you, right? Who are you as a coalition? Why is your coalition doing this work? What is your commitment to the community? This is how you introduce yourself. Why is it that you're so, why is it that you're committed to that specific sector of your community? This is the place where you start developing trust with your community member. It is important for them to know, as community members, to know who you are and what your commitment level is. And I would say they need to know more that you're not just there just to survey them. You're not just there to hold focus groups or to take their message, but you're there to engage them long term. And this is very important, that they are partners with you, right? We're here, we're a coalition, and we're here to partner up with you. And that you're there actually to learn from them also, right? And that they are an essential part of the effort. And I say that because as we engage community members, we have heard many community members say, you know, that foundations or groups have come down and they do like photo storytelling, or they produce they do surveys or listening sessions to produce a report on the state of, of health in South LA. And then they never hear from them again. They come, community members getting, engaged and excited because they really think somebody's here to actually do something about this problem, and then they never hear from them. They have shared with us even that, sometimes they, when they take pictures of them or take their stories, their personal stories as a case study, they even say, we would like to see the final report, and sometimes they don't even get to see the final report of how their community or their story is being represented. So again, that introduction of the fact that you're there long term, and that you're, what's your commitment. The second thing is then identifying the problem. So what is the condition that you're seeking to change? So what is the current oral health state or the current oral health crisis in their community? Help them paint that picture. Help them understand the picture that really speaks to the urgency of the problem, right? That in the middle of housing displacement and job loss, and in the middle of maybe they're failing schools, that the problem that you're actually addressing can actually be of urgency for them also. It's important that you tell that story. How does the problem that you're actually addressing, how does it fit into their lives? How does it fit to job opportunities? How does it fit in terms of education? And what is the long-term impact that you want to have in their community? So even thinking about building oral health literacy into elementary and high school, what is the problem that you're trying to address through that actual goal, right? Is there a lack of literacy, oral health literacy? How have you determined that? What is the impact of the lack of literacy, of oral health literacy in communities? How are we actually seeing that in real life? Number 3 is also then talk about the crossroads, and by that we mean, where are we now, right? At this point, where are we? And where do we go from here? So by crossroads we mean, if you need to tell the story that if we don't do something now, then what will happen, right? If we don't actually, talk about community water fluoridation, what will happen in 5 years from now? What will happen in 3 years from now? What is the actual long-term impact to not doing anything? And why it is important that we are at a crossroads now where we actually need to move on this and do something about it. This helps with the urgency piece. Number 4 is the solution and the plan. So don't just leave them with the problem and the urgency of it, but share your solution and plan. What is your plan to create change? What is it that you're actually, what is your effort look like? What will it look like on the ground? And then listen to them. Have an ear to listen to their reaction or their thoughts to your plan. They understand the community and know the community better than we do. And so we can even, get a sense from them if it's really viable. If our goal is viable for their specific community, if we can actually win that, if it could be something that we can actually produce. And if not, what is a better approach, right? And so an example around building oral health literacy into elementary and high school, what do they think? As parents of elementary and high school students, and the way that their day already runs in school, and what the academic structure is, how do they see it all fitting into that bigger picture? Number 5 is the commitment, and this is super important. So we're not only there to tell them about our work and paint the picture, but we also want to commit them. Every time we engage with community members, we ask for a commitment. This is what we say is the ask. We're asking them to do something specific. We're not only asking them to support us, to say, oh, the coalition's work is great, we agree with the coalition. Of course we want that. We want to be we want to be in partnership with them. We want to make sure that our work resonates with them. But more than that, we're asking them to get involved in a specific way. It could be that we're asking them specifically to attend an educational meeting, or we're asking them to attend a lobby day. We might be asking them to become a speaker on the behalf of the coalition, or we might just ask them to sign a petition or a postcard, or to make a phone call to their local decision maker. And so everyone is going to have the ability to commit at different levels, and that is why we have to have different commitment level opportunities for folks. And then we wrap it up. The last piece as we wrap up, we thank them for their time. We thank them for sharing their expertise. And we remind them, again, about the problem. We remind them about the crossroads, and we remind them about their commitment. And we ask them, how can we support them to continue being committed, right? So for us, that means addressing many other things that prevent or are barriers for our community members to engage with us. So when we have community meetings, so for an example, we had a community meeting here where we had the Los Angeles County Oral Health Director here, and she was here talking about, you know, the plans, the oral health plans. In order to get community members here to engage in that conversation, we need to make sure that, you know, we address issues like childcare and issues of language, right? And so do we have translation? Have we translated all materials into other languages that are needed? What about transportation? What about safety? What about, you know, the fact that a lot of our community members come straight from work at, you know, they get out of work at 5 o'clock. Our meetings are at 6. Have they eaten? Have their children eaten? Do we have something at least to pull them over for the next 2 hours where they're engaged? So it's really having kind of that keen sense of where our community members are coming from when they're at whatever level they're engaging with us. So I would just say here to have you think, before we go into that slide, have you think about how you're currently telling your story, if you're telling your story. And if it's really the way that you're telling it, is it exciting for community members? Do they see the need? Do they see the urgency? Are they really understanding your efforts for the community? So now we can go on to the next one. So with these next couple of slides, just very quickly, as we're thinking of engaging community members, what we call, you know, organizers, and you might not call yourself an organizer. You might be a researcher or a direct provider, or you might be you might be doing advocacy. But if you're really, you know, wanting to start implementing some sort of, at whatever level, right? It might not be at the scope level. We're community organizers. That's what we do. So we don't expect that just by, you know, showing you our model or presenting our model that you will be at that level. But as you're starting to think, like, if we want to start implementing, if we want to start integrating community engagement in our work, these are some of the things that we need to think about in terms of when we start having one-to-one engagement with community members. There's an art to organizing, right? Again, it's about relationship. We need to be, you know, we think about folks who are organizer, folks who actually like to create relationships with community members, like to have conversations with them. We think of folks who can be creative in terms of how do you address issues that might be barriers for community members to actually engage with us. I gave some of those examples, right? Childcare, transportation. So being creative. It's connected to being resourceful, which is one of it's the last point also that I have on this slide. Being observant. What else is going on with community members? You might be talking to a group of community parents about oral health and oral health literacy in their schools. but you might notice that there's something else going on. Maybe there was just a shooting. Maybe there was some sort of violence on campus. And even though your issue is important, there's something more pressing for them. And so how do you engage them, and how do you observe where they're at that moment? You need to be heartfelt and sincere, and you need to have empathy. Again, people skills, which is related to relationship building, being able to communicate with folks, having an intuition in terms of, really telling you where folks are at, kind of a sense of where people are coming from. And we have folks who might say to us, yes, I want to be engaged, but my intuition tells me that, they might have a lot going on, and that maybe they're just saying yes to be nice, but they really don't have the space or place in their life to be engaged. So kind of listening to that intuition, making those connections again, whether through relationships, connections through other folks in the community, connections through leaders in the community, looking at our nonverbal and being really keen to our nonverbal messaging, right? When we talk to folks, what is our body telling us about our relationship to them? And really being also keen to the nonverbal messaging that we're getting from our community members. Next is the science of organizing. So the work that we do is a science. We have a science to it. We do issue analysis. We analyze the issue. We analyze the sector before we engage in any campaign. We do our research. We engage in strategy development. We know that there's a systematic way of doing outreach, some of what I've shared with you today. We do power analysis, which is another tool that we hope to share with you. We analyze, by power analysis, we mean analyze the political landscape. We think about the form of our organization. How is our organization set up so that it's open for community member engagement, not only for inner conversation and inner strategy, but that the strategy is a strategy that includes our community members also. We engage in community planning, not just here to do reactionary work. A lot of times when people think the organizers, they think of protesters and folks that, engage in that type of activity. That is a vehicle. We use that vehicle. We, to be honest with you, at Scope, do not engage in that most of the time. I would say like 90% of our work is in the science of organizing. Doing the training, not only training our staff, training our ally members, but also, and our coalition members, but also training our community members. And then we have a science of numbers, which is a totally another training. We have a science of numbers that helps us have a plan on how do we reach the numbers that we want to reach. So for example, if we want to move from having a base of 25 to having a base of 100 members that support our work within the next year, we have a science of numbers of how many folks we actually have to reach out to in order to get 100 committed members. But again, that's another training, but it's again part of the science of organizing. Next. So our outreach tactics, how do we do this? How does it look like on the ground? We have, at Scope, we have approximately about 16 staff. The majority of them are community organizers, or folks who are actually engaging community members. So they do it in different ways. They do door-to-door. So we actually, again, we identify a target constituency. Who are the folks who we can't door knock every door. And so we look at the geographical area and where and what actual blocks and neighborhoods we want to door knock, and we take that engaging message and story that I just talked about. After we draft it, after we finalize it, we take that message door to door. We also do house meetings. So if we have a leader in a community, we actually ask them to host a house meeting where they actually invite 5 or 10 of their neighbors who are not engaged with us yet. And this is where we do outreach. And we actually tell them about Scope. We tell them about our oral health work. Why is it important? Again, we tailor the message to an audience of 5 to 10 people who are brand new to this conversation, and we have a house meeting that's usually about an hour long. We do phone banking, so we connect. We have a concentrated phone banking where we have at least 3 or more people. And by phone banking, it's not only staff members or our coalition members, but some of our community leaders who have already been working and engaged with us for a long time, who have helped us draft the story and can articulate our goals. Those are the folks who also come to Scope, and they sit at the phones and start having conversations with other newer prospective members or actually just community members at large. We have concentrated phoning, and this is done by our organizers only. And this is where our organizers, they put aside maybe 2 hours out of their day, and they start calling our leaders and our members to actually mobilize them, or to actually have them volunteer or help us with phone banking, help us with house meetings, and help us also with door-to-door knocking. And then the on-site, which is, I think, more common for a lot of groups, is identifying possible, what we call leads, which are possible potential potential new members or new supporters at any location where there are large numbers of we call motive forces. For us, motive forces means potential people who are impacted by our work. And so, again, that is health fairs, community forums, other community events, laundromats, supermarkets, parent meetings, just where there's a large group of people that we can talk to. The next slide, please. So when we talk about building community coalitions, obviously I've talked primarily about community members, about engaging community. But there's also another piece that I mentioned only briefly earlier, and that's community allies. So by that we mean thinking about whether it's community clinics, for example, whether it's other organizations like Scope, right, for folks who are doing community organizing already. Other community allies could be parent groups. It could even be the AYSO, your local soccer group. It could be your local YMCA. It could be. It could also be a academic institution, right? So, for example, here in South LA, we have the University of Southern California, USC, close to us, and so they have resources that we can leverage. And so how do we engage them so they can become our community ally, for example, in the fight for oral health equity, right? And who are the folks at USC, for example, or any other academic institution who can become a community ally? I would also say, think about community leaders. So they're already established community leaders. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily part of an organization or an agency or a clinic, but they're folks who have been in the community for a long time. They're seen maybe as an elder, they're seen as a leader. Maybe when there's violence in the community or when there's something in the community that goes on, people look up to that person. Because it's maybe a person who has a voice, who has a platform. So also seeking them out so that they can be our community allies. And so when we're seeking out community allies, we're not just necessarily throwing this wide net and just inviting everybody into the coalition in your specific geographical area, but it has to be strategic. We ask ourselves, who else serves our target constituency, right? Who else has an interest in the group of people that we're actually serving? And it might be under other issues, maybe, right? Maybe they're actually working around infant mortality rates with that community group. And so how can we connect our work with them? Who else has a stake in your goals or your overall agenda? Are there other coalitions or other groups or other organizations who are not part of your coalition who also see this as important and have similar goals? What strategic relationships should you be building to actually increase your power of community-based efforts, right? So again, if you're not, if you don't have the ability or the resources or manpower necessary to actually do community organizing, is there another group who already is doing community organizing that can actually help build that power? Who has expertise, who has experience in organizing, who has experience around youth leadership development. Maybe you need to organize young people around oral health literacy in schools, right? Who better to be the spokesperson around oral health literacy in schools and young people? Are there folks in the community that know how to develop message stories to frame the issue in a way that actually engages community members? Can you bring them on board? Can they be your partner? Who also has relationships with the decision makers that will actually say yes or no to your policies, right? Sometimes there's organizations who have, like nonprofit organizations who have really good relationships with certain decision makers, certain elected officials, and so how can you partner up with them? And again, who is a no leader in your community on the issue? Is there somebody already? Is there a promotora, a community promotora? Is there a community health worker who's already seen as a leader in terms of oral health or health issues in general? And how do we bring them into our efforts? Next. And so this brings us to leadership development. And when I say leadership development, it's not only leadership development of our community members, which I have mentioned quite a few times, but also leadership development of our community allies, right? And that's like through efforts like this, webinars. It could be that you all have skills, that you can do skills share. And as a coalition, you have a lot of expertise and you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of tools and methodologies, and how are you sharing that with one another, right? And so when we say leadership development, is that training of skills, but it also means deepening on the understanding and political consciousness around your issue, right? So that means, how do we move, and this is complex, but how do we move community members from thinking about a narrow self-interest, like my problems, my situation, my family, my housing issues, and how do you help them move into a broader community interest and into a broader society interest, right? I might not have a child in school. I might be a community member, and I might not have. My children might be all grown. Maybe I'm retired. But how does leadership development help me move from thinking about oral health literacy in schools beyond the fact that it might not have a direct impact in my life, but it has an impact in my community and it has an impact in my society? And so that means that we are always pushing community members to ask deeper questions, right? If there's no access to, let's say we're seeing a decrease in dental providers in our communities. Why, right? And we're developing leaders who can actually ask deeper and deeper questions of why. Why is it, right? There is a reason why our might be moving out of our community. It might be that, maybe they're not being reimbursed by the public health insurance at a rate that is sustainable for them. And so that leads to more questions. Why is it not sustainable? Why is it that they're not being reimbursed at the level that they should be reimbursed? So those are the types of leaders that we want to actually build, and we want to, we want people to actually transform into those types of leaders. Again, we want them to increase their investment and ownership, right? So that they're feeling like they're part of the leadership body, that this movement is theirs, that the coalition that they're really part of the coalition, so that they're excited about volunteering, they're excited about going to meetings, they're excited about recruiting other people from the community and talking to other mothers and talking to other dads. They might even be excited about doing fundraisers for your cause. They want to represent your organization. They want to represent your coalition. They want to say, I'm a community member that works with this coalition because I believe in what the coalition is doing. We also want to increase their skills and ability. So that means that we're actually showing them how to do outreach and recruitment. We're showing them how to identify possible new members. We're giving them reports on our work, so they're understanding our works and they're building their ability to actually understand the work. We want them to help with training. We want them to become speakers. And then we want to also make sure that they have evolving roles, right? So that they're actually participating actively, that they came in as a member and then they became a leader. And we have had some leaders that actually then come on to become staff, full-time staff. So they came in just, coming to a few meetings, and over the years they developed such leadership skills that they came on board, and they became organizers and staff members also. Next. So I want to just wrap up by saying that, again, this is a snapshot of our organizing model of how we engage community members and how we gain support for community members. The other tool that I have mentioned in terms of the science of community organizing is the power analysis and doing a political analysis, a landscape analysis, which is very helpful when we develop campaigns, when we identify our target audience, our target constituent groups, when we identify who can be our potential allies and who are the decision makers who will actually make the ultimate decision around our work. So this is a very engaging tool. As you can see, it's very visual, and as you can see, it's a very popular education type of tool that we can engage our community members, and it helps us again go through 8 steps of really building or painting the picture of what's going on in the political landscape, and it gives us an idea of if our goals are really viable, if we can win them, and what are the strategies and tactics that we need to implement to win. And so this is, I will go into deeper detail. This in itself, the power analysis, is a separate training. And this is what we hope to actually share at the next webinar, primarily the power analysis and how we use it and how we engage folks using the power analysis. Next slide. So I just want to end here by kind of going back to the beginning when we were talking about social justice and health equity and the social determinants of health, to just kind of again remind us that there is nothing as a single issue struggle. So the struggle around oral health and the struggle around job opportunities and the struggle around economic opportunities and the struggle around education in our communities is not a single issue, because our community members and even ourselves, we do not live single issue lives, right? Again, just to remind that our community members come with a host of issues that they face due to where they live, to where they were born, to where they live, to the experience that they've had, to the lack of resources that have been invested in them, and to the education that they might have received, and to just the opportunities that are available for them and for their future generation. And so, here's just a picture of some of our community members coming together, and this is what we call, mobilizing some of our members to actually support us when we go out to speak to community members, or this was specifically a media event that we had. And so these are the faces, these are the folks who are most impacted, and so these are the folks that need to be at the forefront of really supporting and representing the coalition's work. Next slide. So again, just thank you. I think we will have some time for questions or any clarifications or thoughts that you might have about how this information connects to your work, and also here's some information of how you can learn more about our work and keep connected to us.
Gloria, thank you so much. The information was so rich and so challenging, as a matter of fact, and I do want to say to the listeners that we will be doing the next webinar, I think it's August 16th. We changed the date, so just let me take a look. So again, this is Marcia Manter, and we are pleased that you are here. Yes, it will be August 16th, and you will be hearing more information from us on this. Gloria, I think that one of the thoughts that I've had as we're working with our oral health coalitions is for us who are community coalitions working with our partners around our states, is to take each one of these pieces and begin to think through which of these pieces do each of our coalitions have an interest in studying, and how we then can create some opportunities for us as the team of 4 of us working in all 3 states to build it for other people. So I think since we have no other questions,
Ask if anybody wants to post.
Yes, if anyone would like to post a question or a comment, the minute we finish this webinar, we will have a very short survey just asking for your brief reactions. And so we ask you to complete it. That will be very helpful to us, very helpful for Gloria and for Scope. And we will also have this webinar archived, and you will get more information from us about where you can find it on our website. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here, and again, thank you for Gloria. This is a very detailed and very rich presentation in just about 60, 70 minutes. So thanks everyone. Have a good day.